Hello and welcome to the Wonkette Weekend Live Chat. I am Robin Panacchia, and this is the lovely and talented Stephen Robinson. How are you doing today, Stephen?
I'm all right. How are you, Robin?
Good, except for how I just spilled an entire Brita pitcher full of water on myself. Which is why we're a few seconds late. It's a normal thing. It happens to everyone, I'm sure. People who are very graceful. Um,
Um, so we were talking about the Supreme Court non-investigation into the leak of the Dobbs opinion, which happened last summer. The
yeah,
draft opinion, basically overturning Roe v. Wade, had been leaked, and that gave Democrats plenty of time to fundraise and I suppose try to do something. You know, but
I mean, I think it was definitely more in favor of I I think it helped out the right a lot
oh
more because
yes,
than it helped
yeah,
us.
that's
But
the thinking at the time from Republicans was that this was leaked by one of the clerks for one of the woke clerks for one of the liberals justices, and so of course it undermined. This was even worse than overturning Roe v. Wade and subjecting half the population to second class citizenship.
yeah,
You are breaking sort of the country club rules of the Supreme Court. You're putting targets on the back of these noble conservative justices, and so they had to find out who the leaker was, and all this kind of
yeah,
went
because
on.
that was the bigger problem. Of course, it's not sure you ladies are losing your reproductive rights, but the real issue here is that the leak. That's the big thing, and we need to keep focus on that and not on the fact that people lost their reproductive rights.
And
Um,
so this kind of dragged on. They're going to try to find as they never did, which led to slightly more cynical people, including Eli Mistel and myself. Not that I'm lumping myself with a great legal mind, but we were
I
at the
think you're
time.
brilliant.
At the time, we were saying, I don't know. It seems as if they can't find who did this, like that the brilliant hot dog
Yeah,
meme. They can't find out who did this. Maybe the conservatives did this, and it was in big. And the thinking behind this is not because I hate conspiracy theories, and
yeah,
my Vulcan mind recoils at them, but the logic here was that not only has arguably Alito leaked stuff before, but Roberts, from what I was reading, Roberts is trying to, not that he's noble or anything, but he was trying to rally the other MAGA justices to not go as far as they did, to kind of keep with the slow,
hmm,
steady erosion of abortion rights, and not say do something so crazy that would cost the Republicans the Senate and potentially as many House seats as they could have anticipated, and given the otherwise
yeah,
economic conditions. So, Roberts trying to lobby that, and Alito's power play was to leak the draft
yeah,
so that they would then be like, okay, well, if we don't do this, if we're not overturning it, it will look like the woke mob won. And at any point, we've seen this for years. What conservatives always hate is the perception of giving liberals a victory of any kind.
yeah,
So that was his diabolical scheme. That was a theory we didn't know, but they did this. So they'd never found the person who did it. Meaning, how? I mean, come on, how hard? And my favorite was that they said we just couldn't find who did it with a preponderance or evidence or all. It's like, I don't know. I mean, it seems like the majority of the Supreme Court does not actually believe in the rights of defendants
yeah. No,
or the
not
rights
so
of, like,
much.
so, like, suddenly you're all
Yeah,
ACLU on this investigation. Like, come on. And
oh yes,
it's obviously a scam. Um, or as you've written about at will employment or being able to fire people for any
yeah,
reason, they've also gone on record for that. So again, it's like, oh well, we would fire you, but we don't have a preponderance of evidence. We have to go
yeah,
for, like they've got a union in the Supreme Court, right? They got to
yeah,
bring in the person, and it's like, these are police officers where they could, this is clearly, if the person did it, they would have ruined their career. There was so much, again, Ted Cruz and everyone were screaming about coming in and bringing the full force on
Oh,
this
absolutely. Well, I
clerk who released
yeah,
this.
and let's be real. It's not because they cared. It's because they wanted people to not to stop. They wanted a different news cycle. Like that is
Hmm.
what they wanted. They wanted a different news cycle. They didn't want everyone lost their reproductive rights in certain states. Like they didn't want that. They wanted it to be like, they didn't want the outrage.
Um, and so yeah, obviously, like how hard could it have been to find who had access to it, had motive,
I
opportunity?
mean, the one
And
guy, the ex anti-abortion guy was like, I knew about this. I learned it from Alito.
they interviewed, so they did interview the
Like,
justice. It looked on Friday that they hadn't, and then they revealed
yeah.
later they did interview the justice, but like I don't think they were under oath or any
It was
sort
just
of.
kind of like, so did you do it? No? Okay, good then. I
Yeah,
guess we're all set here.
we just want to we
Um,
just want to clarify. It's not like Columbo, right, coming
yeah.
back and saying, "I'm just kind of curious here," because no, it was more of like, "Did so you didn't do it, right?" No, okay.
Like,
Um,
think like they would have like more than anyone access to the best like investigative minds in the country, like whoever is the Columbo or Sherlock Holmes or Jessica Fletcher in the world today. The Supreme Court could get them to like take a look at this. Like they've got access. They've got all the like resources in the world, and they can't find one person who leaked.
so
Really?
yeah,
People have
um,
big mouths, is the thing.
so in my corporate days, so this is going
Hmm.
on some time ago. Um, the corporation I worked for had a strict policy that managers could not date, even consensually, their subordinates, and they also had some sort of rat out people hotline, so you could get an anonymous saying, "Hey, Robin is having a torrid affair with one of her writers," and just put that out there, and that triggers for say the fortunate person you report to. So in my case, say me, I have to now conduct an investigation. So this is what we used to call in the business the Friday surprise. You're
Yeah.
like, it's like 4 p.m. on Friday. You're like, just smooth out of here. I can be at the happy hour place with my friends at 5:05, and then like 4:50. What? I got to deal with this. So um the point here is that then part of the investigation, IT would come. They would you would be like not escorted, but like I'd bring you in and like, okay, we're gonna like you can't go back to your desk. This has been dropped on you. You have to stay at home until we do the investigation. And then your desk and your computer, IT comes, would take your computer and then take the computer of the person you're alleged to be fooling around with, and then they would go and do their deep dive into computers, whatever. With the understanding is that you can't delete anything or hide anything. It's there, like something
Yeah.
incriminating is there. They do the forensic cleanse because no one, unless you're a genius, and most the average person isn't. You just don't know. It's
Yeah.
going to exist somewhere. So the idea, and again, almost 15 years later, that IT technology is not enough. They could find who sent or who forwarded or or that there's no security. Like if it's that important, but I guess it was presented as sort of like country club rules, right? There's an honor
Mhm.
system. So there's no like apparently any clerk can get access to draft opinions and it's not marked or tracked or documented or anything, and that it just all seems highly unlikely. um I don't know. I mean, I guess if you're a clerk you're working on it, but it's just it also speaks, even if you believe this whole story, right, of what they're saying, doesn't this speak to the corruption of the Supreme Court and how pathetic they are as an institution? Because it's sort of like, um, if even like an average corporation is going to be like, okay, we're going to launch this brand new product, it's going to have a tremendous, um, let's, I'll have the intern in the office with me with access. unfettered access to this that I'm about. This will be a big deal if this gets out before our launch date. So again, if you're thinking in the real world of how people keep secrets, but the idea like we're going to drop a
Yeah.
nuclear bomb on the world, they're treating this as if it's any other case. Like that most of the
Hmm.
most of these cases people ignore, right? Like okay, even at the levels that we're really get involved with, like there's certain things of like okay, well that sucks. But this is literally nuclear bomb level
Yeah. And that's
political
what I'm saying.
impact.
If they can't figure, like, if basically what they're saying is it could have been anybody, which is actually kind of scary when you think about it. The thing is, they didn't talk to people's friends because someone, like whoever did it told someone. They told someone and they told someone, and somehow someone knows. To quote the theme song to Pretty Little Liars, two can keep a secret if three can keep a secret if one of them is dead. Like,
Mhm. Or
I know it's a real person's quote. I just
or the great philosopher Bono, a secret is something you tell one other person. Um,
yeah.
that yeah, it doesn't or going on all the levels they would probably go to find a teacher who's gay to fire them, like that private like going on someone's Facebook or like the idea that they could not again someone inclined to do this would have either
Hmm.
told someone or there's some sort of it's just absurd. So obviously this seems like a cover up and it frustrates me because again it makes me start talking like a conspiracy theorist and I hate
Yeah.
that. I just sort of okay, well I guess the most
Well, I don't think
logical
that's
presumption.
conspiracy theory so much as like, well, it had to be someone. It wasn't no one.
Yes, it was in fact leaked.
Like
um
did a ghost do it?
well, and there's a
Like,
history of certain leaks that it's obviously like of any mystery who benefits most
yeah,
who you go into. So
we bono
the average clerk in the beginning
or
the average
Ben,
clerk's
whatever.
not going to benefit from leaking this. um and I think unless you're trying to hide, but that's an extreme. I mean, obviously the idea of forcing the hand of other, again,
Yeah,
Columbo would be like, or the guy from Knives Out and Glass Onion, Daniel Craig's detective, would be like, who benefits most from leaking this? And oh, there was this power play between Alito and Roberts, and this would probably have
or
benefited Alito.
one of these clerks has connections with like pro-life groups and whatnot. Like that is kind of
No,
it's kind of relevant.
they tried everything and it failed. So speaking of the courts though, because this is the whole thing we've been talking about with the courts and the importance of the courts and this whole debacle in New York where the governor so we get our fair share of trolls at Wonkette and online. I saw that
Mhm.
with Eli Mistel, there were people white splaining to him about how this judge was actually a great pick and everything. And we got a lot of folks who were doing sort of, um, but actually, this guy, if you looked at these things, at these abortion right groups or labor groups, the people who do this for a living, that they were upset about
Yeah,
this ruling. So I'm just a white guy on the internet, but I looked at this while sitting on the toilet, and
yeah.
I think it seems fine. And this is just it's one of those things of where you to be
Like the
so
YouTube thing especially was very, very unusual. Like that was not the expected decision at all. It was kind of ridiculous, and it very much I'm sure everyone knows, but the union decision was there was a law that companies can't sue union leaders. But then he ruled, yeah, you know what? It's actually okay for them to do that, which was an upending in this particular instance because the union leaders criticized the company, and the company was really sad about that. So, let them
yeah,
sue.
and it is sort of the circular logic, right? So this happens a lot. So someone's like, "Oh well, but actually,
Yeah.
this was the correct interpretation, and LaSalle's
Mm.
a good guy." And it's like, okay, that's fine, but union leaders aren't going to like him,
Yeah.
and Democrats should probably appoint judges that union leaders like, because as
Yeah.
Biden, our president, says he's our most pro-labor person. It is just like, if we could say, oh, this pro-choice ruling that someone made makes perfect sense. It's totally right. You shouldn't have, you shouldn't allow people to harass women in front of abortion clinics. But and here's why this fits with the law. But that doesn't that wouldn't make it that wouldn't negate an abortion group not liking the ruling, right? Like
Yeah.
if I'm trying to explain that to them, it's like, well, no, I mean, okay, that seems fair. So he's on that side. He's not on our side. So the idea that so many, so-called mostly white male liberals are insistent on trying to defend, because in their mind, this is somehow a progressive victory, which it isn't, because progressives, once again, as we've been told for ages, AOC is not all of New York. So if there's enough New York
Yeah.
state senators to bounce this guy, it's not just AOC, someone like AOC saying, oh, you're not liberal enough.
Yeah.
And progressives have done this. You've done this. You said, like, okay, well, I think this judge or this politician is not liberal enough for me. That usually doesn't mean that Republicans like that judge.
Yeah.
They still
That's the
say,
thing. This is the thing. Like, there is this like weird, sad idea that people have that, like, there are things Kathy Hochul can do that'll make Republicans go, you know what, maybe I will vote for her. No, it's not happening. That is not how things work at all. She could be super tough on crime, which is actually causes so much more crime than not being tough on crime. And Republicans would still say, "Oh, she's soft on crime," and everyone would go along with them on that. They're not. There isn't some. Yes, yes, it is very difficult. Um, they're not gonna like you. They're not gonna be your friend. There's no like.
yeah. Well, I guess what's frustrating to me is at least acknowledge the strategy. So instead,
Mhm.
these trolls insist that these are just angry progressives or activists who can't read good and don't understand these opinions. These are actually, and Hakeem Jeffries, unfortunately, he was just like, no one's more progressive than I am, which is what some people like to say. And this guy's fine and perfectly qualified, but it's like, no. Well, two things: qualifications are bullshit. I don't know how many rights we need to lose before Democrats stop saying qualifications matter,
Mhm.
because Gorsuch is qualified. Like, I don't think he's not qualified. He is just qualified for the bad people.
Yeah.
Sorry to make it that simple. And so you know, mainstream Democrats can complain that Senate Republicans and Trump put 12-year-old idiots on the bench, and they aren't qualified. They don't have their ABA rating and
Mhm.
their secret decoder rings. They still have the power. So
Yep.
Republicans are kind of like, no, this person's going to serve for life and rubber stamp our BS, and that's what matters. That's what qualifications matter.
Yeah.
So ultimately, it's about whether this person is going to, on the bench, uphold your rights. And I think there's a sense among generally white cis men about, we would rather be right because my rights aren't at risk, right? So,
Yeah.
oh, no, it has to be what's objective and fair. So we shouldn't play by Republican rules. It's like, okay, well, what happens is you get, this already happened. Like the guy that LaSalle is the woman LaSalle was replacing was the one Cuomo put
Yep.
on it and like bumped, trash the map. And that is why there's a Republican House majority,
Yeah.
literally. Like, she was put basically, okay, well, all the Democrats are now in one House seat and have to compete against each other.
Yeah.
Like, it was just a disaster. Like, literally, when you have a 5-vote majority, okay, here, and here, New York is why.
Mhm.
And then
There are consequences to judges, which is why when you are voting, you really should still look at all of the judges.
So
People don't do that, and that
and,
makes me so nervous.
and then Hochul's doing this BS in New York, a blue state, whereas DeSantis, which is, Florida's getting redder, but was a swing
Yeah,
state. Obama won twice. He's like, oh yeah, your map isn't pro-Republican enough. Republicans take it back and make it pro-Republican.
yeah,
So it's just absurd. It's a sort of, I don't know how many, it's just so weird to see again, a lot of these white dude liberals who again always are about listen to black women, except the Senate, New York Senate majority leader is a
yeah.
black woman who's like, I don't,
Yeah,
yes.
true story. If you want to find someone who like does not care at all about fucked up criminal justice issues, it is a man. It is a white guy with hashtag vote like black women in his thing. Why are you talking about the death penalty? There's nothing like Republicans will be mad. And I'm like, really?
Well, this perception that Republicans, it's like, look, if this guy, he could, if he was just as moderate as Merrick Garland, Elise Stefanik, others would be calling him a groomer. And if they're not, if they're throwing him softballs and during a Senate hearing, okay, well, maybe he shouldn't have nominated this
might
guy.
want to think about why that is.
But there's this belief deep down. I think there's this desperate need to be liked by other white people who are mostly Republicans, and like, oh, they like my guy, they like my decisions. It's right, even though instead you're being treated as a patsy. Because these Republicans, there's no way, there are no reasonable Republicans, even in New York. These are the same people who had endorsed a literal fascist against Hochul. So these are people who, if they like this judge, it's not because they believe he's fair and even this is desperate West Wingism, right? That's the West Wing episode where, oh, this person is so moderate and even tempered and fair that even reasonable Republicans who don't exist, but in the fantasy, reasonable Republicans and moderate Democrats agree. So we're going to have, and that's what Hochul wanted, right? This is going to be my consensus.
That's the proof that they're good. Like,
this is going to be our consensus candidate, and those damn progressives, like, but those meddling kids in Scooby-Doo messed this up for me, and they're really pissed. But it's not just progressives; it was actually mainstream, the NAACP, unions and abortion rights groups. And given this time of the Senate, it's like, well, the whole point is that when we are in power, we should be nominating judges who make Republicans
because they always think if we're gracious to them, then when they're in charge, they will be gracious to us. And that is not a thing that works in real life. We were speaking of a very specific archetype here. And more or less the fact that when people are making that particular case, they do, for the most part, tend to be white liberal men.
Yeah, it is. Like, it is usually white liberal men. Well, they define themselves as white liberals. I don't think all white liberal men, but it's just sort of like I don't think all black people like funk music, but there's we're a good majority of us do. So it's a reasonable statement to make about observing behavior amongst folks. Especially regarding this incident. I mean, there's a sense of, we have to sort of acknowledge that the sense of right with the party, there's a sense of when dealing with issues where there's any degree of, you might have to listen to groups who aren't part of this established group. So minorities, women, or whatever, people of color, there's a limit to the degree that these groups will accept what we have to say.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, well, here's the good black person, here's the good woman, here's the good, gay person, but that's to a point. Don't cross that point. Definitely don't embarrass me in public. Feels like you're kind of a pet, right? Like, don't. Okay, well, I brought you to the country club. Don't pee on the carpet in front of people with your unfortunate opinions on things that I disagree with. So everything's at the level of what they believe is racist or sexist enough. And that's frustrating because it's sort of, again, as you said, the folks who mostly have like, oh, listen to black women are one, whenever one, I don't like racial essentialism in that regard, but
Yeah,
it's not even true because it's like, okay, well, which black women? And then it's
yeah.
just about whether you only listen to black women who are moderates or have your own politics, and it's just about you're using their race
I
as a
mean, that's like,
shield.
I mean, everyone has, like, yes, the people that are in your circle that hang around with you probably sort of agree with you on things. The people that hang out in my circle sort of agree with me on things. Like, it's not, oh, you know who represents all Black women? My one friend.
Well, yeah, that
So
happened.
I do what she says.
Well,
Like,
yeah, it was just sort of so it's like I think and it's a delicate balance, but I think it's one thing to be like if someone says, "Oh, well, no woman likes mob movies or stuff like A Clockwork Orange or Fight Club," and
but did
any
you ever see
male
my article on that? I think I forget who it was for, but I did a whole thing on this National Review guy did an article on how, oh, it was in Death and Taxes when I was there,
Mhm.
about how women can never understand Goodfellas because of all the ball busting. And I'm like,
Yeah, and so
yeah,
that's sort of a
I know
statement of
nothing
like
of that.
women. Well, I do know women who like this, but that can counter an essentialist statement that women
Yeah,
don't like something. Oh, I do. Or if you said like if you met someone who's like, no, black guys don't like musical theater, you could say, well, actually, I do know. But it's one thing to be like,
I
if
know a lot
someone's yeah,
actually. Although
but
but here's the thing. I used to hang out in musical theater. Like I used to do a lot of musical theater. So those were the people I knew.
but if someone is sort of like has an opinion of, oh, well, this particular show I found offensive to me as a woman, here's my reasoning, you
Yeah.
can't immediately dismantle those reasons by saying, oh, well, my best friend, who's a lady, loved Clockwork Orange, so your arguments are invalid. It's like, well, no, they're not invalid. Those are still representative of her opinions as a woman. And so I think that's what we get a lot of, where it's
Yeah.
just using people's race as a shield, which is kind of, nothing can stop people from doing that. It's just, I don't think it's the best. Just go ahead and don't
You
pretend that
know,
you
and
know
the
black
only people
people
who
well.
don't have to deal with that are white dudes. Like no one really is like, oh, well, I have a white male friend and he does not like Die Hard. So therefore, facts.
Well, yeah, I mean, even the idea of just whenever you use shorthand, speaking even a majority
Yeah.
of the group, white people are very tend to be, well, not just me or not, I'm one exception. Um, and it's fascinating. I mean, you would probably more likely expect this from white men, but even sometimes white women do who are feminists who will talk about, well, this is what men are like. But if someone were to say, in our experience, white women will sometimes respond will be, well, no, 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 I'm not like that. Because basically I get it. Everyone likes to feel that they're a unique, you know, snowflake. They are an exception to a rule, but sometimes being an exception to a rule means that are the exception. That's right there in the title. So um I do believe you need to like at least acknowledge sometimes that there are certain differences or things, but
Yeah.
I don't
No one is a
like
monolith. Like,
yeah, but I mean I don't like gender essentialism. I've long not enjoyed that or racial essentialism. But it's interesting because that I feel gender essentialism has become more controversial or not more of an issue now when I think transphobic people, especially Republicans, have been big on defining what a woman is, right? Not just a man,
yeah.
but defining what a woman is. And it'll be something
And
of
all of
like,
their ideas are terrible.
well, they suddenly define it and it's suddenly like for their purposes, for their transphobic purposes, suddenly being a woman and being a man is all about your genitalia, right? Or your
Mhm.
ability to reproduce, which growing up, that was very different. Suddenly these Republicans who are these adult Republicans saying this, when they were pointing and calling someone a, queer epithets, calling them a sissy and saying that they weren't a real. You're not a real man if you're not X, Y, and
Yeah.
Z. And that list of you're not a real man or even you're not a real woman didn't talk about the junk because like the guy they're saying is not a real man because he doesn't do all these things was like, okay, well, nothing on that list has anything to do with I have a penis and I don't have a vagina. I'm a man, right? I'm just as much a man, even though I don't like sports or I like
Yeah.
musicals or I sleep with other men. But suddenly that's all about this one ruling, like for like, oh, you're a woman, which again, I grew up at a time of where, oh, that when they would start terms like butch and whatever to basically say you are not a real woman because a woman is these things. That's nothing to do with your ability to reproduce. And suddenly this sort of essentialism is like
Yeah.
very clear about what a woman is suddenly,
And
which is
it's your
not.
genitals. Like,
But I think but a weird so if J.K. Rowling and some other groups were anti-trust, sort of the term is turf, I guess, their sense is often they have that sort of gender essentialism of like being a woman is an exclusive club. This is what being a woman is, and you're not a woman if you're not part of this club.
mhm,
And so that becomes you can sort of see why they are struggling. I think it's a petty struggling, but they're struggling because for them it's like there's an essentialism. It's like you are being a woman is this experience. And so if you
mhm.
haven't had this experience or if you don't, women are inherently like sometimes you've seen this, right? There'll be well, if women were running Russia and Ukraine, there would be no war.
Which has always been such bullshit. There have always been female warhawks. Like that's it's a thing that happens. It's not just men. Like I don't um like no, there are a lot of women who are very into war as a rule. We're not like that. I mean, I like to think I'm personally pretty good at talking shit out, but like it's not like because of my, reproductive organs, like that doesn't have anything to do with it. But that's always been, you know, I think it's supposed to be like this idea that women are like just like softer and rather than, saying they're more rational, it's like, oh, well, women wouldn't do that. Women wouldn't, but yeah, no, of course women would. There are
Yeah,
just as many ridiculous women as there are men.
there's
But
that sort of essentialism, right? Or the idea that men are inherently more dangerous to be around women. And that's a lot of
yeah.
transphobic arguments are
Oh
rooted
yeah.
in this. Like, don't have men and women's spaces as a risk or a danger. And so if you come from that aspect that a group of people are inherently more violent or more dangerous, there is like, well, then what separates it? So okay, for them it's just like, well, no, you can't suddenly say I can't suddenly
Mhm.
say I'm a woman and I'm no longer a threat to you because I believe that you're a threat. So I think those are those things that becomes difficult for them to rationalize, right? Like of like, well, what is it? Like, okay, well, if it's just a socialization or whatever. So I think that's what gets you when you're in the sense of people have to be a specific thing. um
I mean, as far as that goes, they talk about oh my God, they can't, like, what about women's prisons? Well, 50% of sexual assault reports from prisons are about correctional officers. Like,
mhm.
if it's fine for male correctional officers to be there, then I think it's fine for a trans woman to be there. Like, really? You're like, that's the thing that you're upset about? When again, 50% of sexual assaults, and also in men's prisons, like it's a universal thing. Correctional officers have a little bit of a problem with sexual assault. So,
You were
uh,
right. You were writing about the 1001 anti-trans bills, and I don't know if you
mhm.
covered this one, but there was something about like I don't know, some sort of I would say anti-MAME rule where it's illegal to dress up for a man to dress up or essentially
Oh,
a man
yeah.
dressed up as a woman in any way that is sadder, like being over. It was absurd. It was just like, well, what it,
Like,
huh?
no productions of Twelfth Night anymore. Like,
And it's very focused on women and like heightened femininity, whereas there's no like, I guess being Greta Garbo's okay or Annie
yeah.
Lennox, like that is still like, is that, but because they've, I guess transphobes or people in general, arguably perhaps, have sexualized women's clothing, right?
Yeah.
Like, so makeup and whatever that is becoming more like a woman, and it's rooted in misogyny because the worst thing you can be is a woman, right?
Mhm.
So, um, Annie Lennox is still a woman, even if she's wearing the suit with the short hair in the Sweet Dreams video. That is not a drag act, right?
Yeah.
That's not
But if a
her being
man does
drag.
it, it's inherently sexual
Yes,
because
like something charged. Like if in that same video,
mhm,
her partner had been wearing a dress with makeup,
mhm,
he's suddenly like this is something dangerous or whatever, which is sort of
mhm.
this idea of like a very limited sense of male expression and men. Right, yeah, but your point about 12 Nights for Day, like for years, people were taking their children to see, like in Romeo and Juliet, and it wasn't like you were doing it
Yeah,
in pre-COVID social distancing performances of like, I'm going to stand over here and
yeah.
Juliet, you're so beautiful. I'm not gonna actually touch you because you're actually a 14-year-old boy, and I gotta stand here, and it can't be sexualized. I mean, these are
I
very
mean, what's it
romantic.
called? The dude actually just got sued by the grown-up Romeo and Juliet. I'm blanking on the name from the movie. Who's the director of Romeo and
Zeffirelli.
Juliet? Yeah, Zeffirelli. His estate has been sued by the kids who played. No, it's
I'm
like
sorry,
um.
you called it grown up Romeo and Juliet.
Oh, whatever.
I'm
No,
sorry.
no, like they're adults now. Is what I meant.
Yes.
Sorry. The actors who played them as when they were children are now suing the estate of Franco Zeffirelli, um, basically saying that they were forced into doing a lot of shit and being naked, and what have you, that they did not want to do, and did not consent to. So
Yes, I
yeah,
remember that.
they
I think
do that
we
today.
we discussed this, I think, on Slack, where we saw Romeo and Juliet when I was, I think, in high school, so my freshman year.
Yeah, you also
English
watched
class,
it in high school.
and there's a Romeo bare butt scene.
Hmm.
And I guess whatever the video in our room was being controlled by the librarian, and our librarian, Miss Rodell, lovely lady, um, who many people would not have agreed was a lady, but she was. But she had a receding hairline and dressed in ways that were people might judge. So anyway, she freaked out because the butt. She was apparently prepared for the butt scene, so she was going to, when it occurred, fast forward through the butt. So it'd just be a speeding butt on screen, and then it would stop. But she effed it up. It was like it was farce. So suddenly a farce. So she, I think, pushed slow motion. So
Oh
suddenly the
God,
butt is moving very slowly across the screen. It was like, oh, this is too much butt. We were very happy to see a bare butt and laugh about it because we're 14-year-olds, but like this is way too
yeah.
much. Like now what's going on? And then it started going quickly, get whatever. It was farcical. And
See, that was no big revelation to me because I had already seen Yentl by that point. So
I just don't
also butts in Yentl.
I just don't see how nudity is that bizarre, especially at this point when you're in a locker room. You probably
Yeah,
I don't know. Things are very um and that's the other that becomes the other thing we're talking about, the gender essentialism, right? Like the idea of like, oh no, if there's some of different parts in the locker room changing.
yeah.
I'm nervous about anyone seeing me naked because your body is weird and you don't want to you know, there was a strange gym teacher we had in junior high called Mr. Riddles. I gives you all that. So for whatever reason, he comes and announces that class. We're already having to because it was gyms. We'd have to shower, and it was already weird. Like eighth graders didn't want to do this in front of other people and put on clothing. But he had came out and he said, like, okay, well, someone's been stealing the towels. So it's like, what? Why would anyone steal the towels, right? And so now I'm keeping all the dry towels in my office. And so this is the part of the story where people have the look on your face that you do. They don't
Yeah.
believe this occurred. So he's like, they have the and and you need to come in and get the towel from my office and then but like we'd be nude or whatever. So we had a huddle. It was like, okay, we don't really want to do this. And so we just stopped showering. So then he has a whole big hygiene conversation where we have to shower and do this. And I remember telling my mother
Yeah, by the
this.
time I was in high school, they weren't doing the showering in after gym class thing, thank goodness.
Yeah, they were very, but you had that was sort of the whole that was looming over. I don't know how to clarify how it loomed over you. Gym was already bad. I got first period gym my freshman year. Like how much bad stuff needs to it's already bad enough starting high school, but you get first period gym and you had to shower
Yeah.
with other
I was
people.
so glad when I switched to a performing arts high school and like I could take dance instead of actual gym, which sucked. Although I was excellent at badminton.
Yeah, I mean, I don't
Excellent. I was amazing at it. The secret is singing Patsy Cline songs.
so I guess either of us would have been uncomfortable with someone we're uncomfortable with anyone seeing us naked. I don't know if I've been more. I mean, I think because it's been charged. I mean, girls naked and being in the locker room with girl. So certainly
Yeah.
that would have been. But my sense with that is okay. If you're very concerned about that, do like single stall type things or
Yeah.
something. But
I
like,
mean, I go to the like whenever I go to the gym, like you can change in the bathroom or in a shower stall if you want. Um, and then there are the people who are like loud and proud, here I am a naked person, and you're like, good for you. Like
but
I
yeah,
don't.
a lot of Republicans really do seem to think the only thing that will that any sort of acknowledgement of a trans person letting them use will suddenly change that bathroom into something from like a prison movie and it's just dark and like
Yeah.
suddenly someone's going to get assaulted. It's so bizarre to me, but these are not particularly healthy people.
No, they're not well. Like they're not well. They're not doing okay. They're going a little bit off the deep end, and I I think eventually they're going to hit a wall where they have to start rolling back a little bit. But it does not seem to be that it does not seem like that is going to be happening anytime soon, which is pretty freaking scary. Like,
Well, it just gets worse and worse. So speaking of abortion, we had earlier posted the link to Vice President Harris's you know, honoring the
yeah, it
50th
is
anniversary of Roe v. Wade. I don't know if you had a chance to watch any of it. I
I
have
have
not
not.
yet.
Yeah, it's the 50th anniversary today. I'm sort of like, I used to write a thing every single year for the anniversary of Roe v. Wade, and I did not write one this year because
Well, Roe's
we
dead,
don't have it
right?
anymore. Like, what am I going to do? Ah, yikes. Sorry,
It's
I picked
I
my
mean,
stand.
I guess it's sort of like because Roe is dead, and
Yeah.
we need to. I do think acknowledge that its death, and
You're like, hey, remember that time when we had reproductive rights?
and Florida was a weird choice for it. I guess the idea of bringing the fight to Florida. Florida's having a lot of crazy anti-abortion type
Yeah.
rulings or whatever, but given the fact that we seem to be powerless to confront that, and both
I don't think Florida was a
DeSantis.
weird choice in that, like, Florida is currently like the Republican power center.
Mhm.
Like that's where Mar-a-Lago is. That's where Ron DeSantis is. And so I sort of see it as like, she was taking the fight to them.
No,
Um,
I that's how I had phrased it in the post this morning. Like she's going to them. It's just
yeah,
uh when we of course someone got crushed, Charlie Crist and Val Deming. So we have
yeah.
been certainly it's been a tough battle there. I don't know. I do agree that we shouldn't give up on Florida and we need to figure out how to crack the code there and start winning the statewide again as we had been, but it seems like we've been struggling to do that.
I mean, it's tough to say, like, my dad is down there right now, and he's like, my dad is, nowhere like near where like my mom and my sister and I live in terms of uh politics. Like he's a little bit more normal, I guess. But he's like horrified. He's like, every single person you meet, it's like they're, a Trump zombie. And to be fair, he's like, in like Naples and Bonita Springs. So like that's really a lot of who you're going to be running into there. Uh,
Yeah, it's
but so it's
a
probably
lot
not
of
everywhere, but
well, the place has gotten more I mean,
yeah,
certainly both either people moving there or but the
yeah,
registrations changed, and I think
yeah,
we've been losing ground in Florida. I mean, it's very clear. I
yeah,
think uh, the degree of ass whooping, it was almost like I mean, it felt as if Democrats did not contest the Senate and governor race. Like when you're losing by 16 or 19 points
yeah,
in a state that 2 years earlier Biden had lost by only 3, that does not seem like it was contested. So what happened? I mean, we've had this debate, but it just seems you have to sort of address, like, well, what happened? How did we lose so badly? Because, I'm not trying to be um, mean or anything, but it's just if we're taking the fight to them, we should acknowledge like the most recent battle at a time where trying to
yeah,
roll back abortion rights, being overly MAGA, quote unquote, was costing people elections. So like
yeah,
where agree where where Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, for
yeah,
example, was a better story for us than Florida is interesting. I mean, we could just say there were better candidates
yeah.
than that we had in Florida, and that Florida was
Well,
not as
this is the
organized.
thing. Just organizing my thoughts for a second here, because again, I am a little ADHD. I mean, I'm a lot. I'm just less so because I am medicated. But in Pennsylvania, they didn't do the "we're just like conservatives, but a little bit better" thing. They didn't do that because here's the thing. I forget what I was writing about the other day oh, sorry. Bill Maher, who is terrible, did say one thing that is sort of true. It's like the Republicans like winners. And I think that when Democrats do this like thing where they sort of concede that conservatives are right about everything, but we want to like like not as radical as
Mhm.
they want, they come across as losers. I think that when Democrats do the "oh, I'm going to be tough on crime too" thing, I um I think they come across as losers. That's they come across as, and because they're gonna get accused of that anyway. Like no matter what, people are gonna call you a commie. You might as well actually explain, hey, these laws actually do not make you more safe. These these things that Republicans are pushing for do not have the effect that you think that they are going to have. And this is better, and here is why. And that is so much more effective
Mhm.
than, you know, "oh, I'm not bad like the
Oh yeah,
others. I'm good. I'm good. Love me." Like
that's certainly a compelling point, Robin. And I think if you compare what happened to Georgia and Florida, so it's been written that Stacey Abrams, what made it sort of very difficult for her to beat
yeah,
Kemp. One, Kemp wound up looking like a moderate by comparison, just because it didn't go along with the coup, which is sort
yeah,
of slow cap for Kemp. But also, Republicans had spent years making Abrams sort of on a national level a scary figure. And
yeah.
even saying stopping Abrams was like the tagline for Kemp.
Oh
We
yeah,
will stop her here. And it is an interesting parallel to Florida because it seemed as if Democrats were doing this. It just didn't seem as effective,
yeah,
where DeSantis was a national figure. He's in the news every day. almost. He was presented as being overtly an autocrat and
Yeah,
wannabe despot, um, and certainly not a moderate. You could argue that he had won narrowly in 2018 by coming across as a normal Republican who just happened to want to kiss Trump's butt. But
yeah.
here he was like presented as even worse than Trump and really dangerous.
And he absolutely is an authoritarian.
And
Like
some Democrats were
that's
saying we have to stop DeSantis. He's going to run. We have to stop him here, and it just didn't happen. And that is, and to me, it seems dangerous that that we weren't able to either field a candidate. Like I mean, I've joked about this. I felt like at what point, like how many months do you have to be a resident to run for governor in Florida? So whatever that was, just say please, George Clooney, Tom Hanks,
yeah.
yeah, Elizabeth Olsen, please parachute into granted, of the three, Elizabeth Olsen, I would have voted for, but I don't know if others have my affection for her. I think, but definitely, like, just get anybody who's very popular who could just stand up there and be like, "Hey, I'm George Clooney or Ronnie," and just beat these guys on that level alone would be enough. I mean, we tried, to your point though, we tried with look, Demings is a cop. I'm a cop. Cops like me. I used to be a cop. I'm really a cop. I'm tough on crime. Rubio
Because they
isn't tough
don't
on crime, and it doesn't
re-
work. They don't trust us because what they
because they
define
also
as
don't really. Here's the thing, and maybe people disagree with me on this. I don't think they really care. Like I don't. I think that a lot of the things that they go after Dems about, they don't genuinely like care about those things. They just want to attack people, and they're going to say whatever they're going to say. I don't think that anyone actually likes cops all that much.
well,
Like,
I do believe, because no one want no one wants streets filled with
mhm.
homeless people. Unfortunately, no one wants that. No one not unfortunately, I'm
Yeah,
just saying
and the
from a
most
human
effective
standpoint.
way to deal with homelessness is to house them.
Yes, or you could do what Democrats often do in Portland and
Yeah,
Oregon and do nothing and then almost wind up getting fascists installed, because if you do nothing, people will go to the crazy person saying, "I'll make the problem go away."
yeah.
So you actually have, unfortunately, you're strapped between a fascist and a socialist place, because if you do something that's perceived as socialist, it's, "Well, I can't do that." And so the business owners are
But
like, "We'll go to the
here's the thing.
fascist."
I don't think that people, I think that Democrats very much overestimate the amount that people actually are freaked out by, you know, a lot of things. And I also think that, yes, yes, this is correct. But what people want are things to actually happen. And the more left wing solutions to problems will actually help stop the things that people want to stop. So we should campaign on being effective, because what's effective isn't always, the thing that feels good.
Oh
And
yeah.
I think that, what Republicans do is they sort of try and pick things that like sound cathartic, like we're going to, arrest, send all the people who are dealing fentanyl to death row, and we're going to kill them all. It'll be great. It'll be really satisfying. And
Well,
you're
yeah.
going to get to enjoy that, and it'll be fun. Um, you know,
Well, also
stop countering that with
slow and steady solutions aren't necessarily, I think Democrats often prefer slow and steady solutions.
yeah.
I'm inclined, people might think I'm some crazy radical progressive, but my natural instinct tends to be, professionally and other things, is sort of measured response. However, I also exist in the real world, right? And the real
Mhm.
world is one where Republicans want to destroy me. And I think sometimes Democrats don't get that.
Yeah.
Sometimes, in the sense of, okay, well, your slow and steady program okay, here's the period where nothing looks like it's happening. That's when public is going to pounce. And so if you have, here's my 187-point plan to deal with homelessness, and here's how we're slow, and you can't point to a change within an immediate amount of
Yeah.
time.
Well, because it
Republicans
becomes
meanwhile
like
are
a
saying,
boiling frog situation.
yes. So immediately, but the response of being like, we need to do something immediately and build and
Yeah,
make change, and drastic change makes you sound like, oh no, you sound like Elizabeth Warren, and we don't want drastic change, and drastic change is scary. It's like, which is just so weird to me because generally speaking, if you do it quickly and show
yeah.
results, you have less time for people to
I'm a pull the
point at.
Band-Aid off person. Like I'm just like,
Yeah,
just
I
get
mean,
it done.
look, in a world where Republicans were good faith actors,
Hmm.
slow and steady works. Like, I want to slowly and steadily remodel my home.
Yeah,
But if I'm having to deal with someone coming to my house and telling my wife, like, you need to
yeah,
leave this guy because look, your patio it's been a year, and your patio still doesn't look great. And your garage isn't designed. Look, we should just go and get a new house and leave this guy because this person's actively trying to antagonize the situation, as
yeah.
opposed to being like, well, no, this is going to cost more if we do. It's going to be, and here's the risks if we do it all at once. And so I think you have to sort of try to balance the fact that Republicans are bad faith actors, and I think we don't do that nearly enough, and that's a problem with the homeless crisis, specifically because ultimately there are people. And I've seen it firsthand. I've seen it with folks on the level who claim they're really Democrats or whatever. They are losing their patience, and we were very close to disaster in Oregon as a result of that. So I do think we need to, unfortunately, the best case solution is the one you described, but what you're describing will never happen because people view that as insane liberalism. You're housing people. Instead, here's the reasonable conservative response, Robin. What we need to do is criminalize homelessness.
Yeah.
And
Well,
so
that's what they want
all
to
homelessness,
do.
it's a federal offense, and we'll take the homeless and we'll put them in prisons forever. Well, isn't that housing them? Yes, but it's bad. Didn't you see a prison movie? And it's like, I
Yeah.
don't know. Like, okay, well, if it costs X amount to do this humanely, and it costs more to do it inhumanely, and you would rather do the inhumane thing, I don't know what to do with you. But that's a lot of people in our world right now. It's
Well,
scary.
this is the thing. Americans are very, very much enamored and sort of like, I don't know if brainwash is the right idea. Um, into the whole idea of tough love works, which it does not. Like it actually makes things worse and is bad in terms of like trying to help. I mean,
No, no.
a little bit, yeah. You can't like, coddle people in your own family necessarily, but tough love usually ends with people dying.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Well, it's
there's no such thing
yeah.
as rock bottom.
You've
And
seen
quite
it
frankly,
with the didn't you see that you were talking about the in Iowa where they're like trying to be even crueler to the poor
yeah.
regarding their food stamps, what they can purchase, the type of food they can purchase, and there's no logic to it other than to make their lives more difficult. Can you tell them, just barely break that down for them of what they're like trying to pick apart, because people still labor on this idea that poor people are buying lobster or something.
Oh, the food thing. Yeah, no, that is absolutely they want to make it so that no one can, they can only have cheese that comes in blocks. They can only have like they can't have cubed cheese or sliced cheese, and they can't have American cheese. Like God forbid they can make a freaking grilled cheese sandwich. They can only have canned as far as meat goes, they can either have canned chunk light tuna, which is the gross kind. I don't fuck with chunk light personally. And yeah, they can't. Yeah, she's great.
Mhm.
Like they can't have all of these various kinds of food because what it is they want it to be. They think if they make it really horrible to be poor, which it
Mhm.
already is, they think it's not miserable enough to be poor to like motivate people to go and become bajillionaires. But the fact is that our entire society is reliant on people being super poor.
Oh yeah.
Like America could factually not function without people doing low wage jobs, which is a thing that we learned after the pandemic. Like we can't function without people doing that, but they also want everyone to pick themselves up by their bootstraps. Like we can't.
Yes, like why not? I want to get groceries. Like, what is
Yeah.
wrong with paying these people enough that they can do it and live a decent life? And also, there's this perception I've noticed amongst certain breed of conservative that poor people don't have the same issues they have, like anxiety. So the person who starts
Hmm.
to the guy starts to freak out, like, oh my God, so many choices, so many things. It's like I'm so anxious and I have these problems and
Yeah.
whatever. And that's fair. Do you understand that the poor person who has to figure out you're complaining, this sorry, person who complains about the trash. Oh, separating the trash. I have to put this here and that's here.
Hmm.
I hate liberals for doing this, but they support this sort of ridiculous, circuitous thing of poor people trying to figure out the food they can buy and how
Yep.
frustrating that must be because that's literally eating. Right for me, it's like okay,
Yep.
I can't put the plastic lid in here or the plastic bag. I do this. That's annoying, but I'm going to go back into my warm house and eat.
Yep.
And with the food thing, that's something that it always comes up to me. It's like, again, back at my another corporate America story. So I worked with one person, pretty conservative person. This person was someone who, and this is not about body shaming or fact, it's a literal blood sugar issue, just would start to unravel after about 3 or 4. So if you were working late, you understood that you needed to make sure food was going to come in, or they would like literally throwing like a coffee cup at you or something of like I
Yeah.
remember the first time like what just happened, like why, like literally Dr. Jekyll Miss Hyde type stuff. And what occurred to me at some point was okay, well this is a C-level executive, we're catering to this, we get this, we understand that. Do you know who also probably has these issues? Maybe a child who didn't eat breakfast that morning
Yeah.
and is in school and there's no hangry, there's no catering to that.
Hmm.
Your acting out means, okay, you're expelled or you're suspended or you're on the track of problem student. And problem student so many times it's just this kid didn't fucking
And
eat
I
this
will
morning.
tell you, that kind of stuff sticks with you your entire life. Like it's really, really like if you get labeled a bad kid or a problem child or, whatever, as a even like as a child, like you still in your head for the rest of your life think of yourself as being a fuck up. And I am like personal, like human evidence of that because I was in trouble all the fucking time. I spent my goddamn life in the principal's office. And it's really hard to get over. It's a horrible thing to do to children. Like, so maybe we should try and like not make that more likely to happen.
Yeah, like just feeding students is going to be the best way of making sure that
Yeah.
will resolve a lot of problems. But there's pushback against that because the idea is that what should happen is that you should have a wonderful mother at home making you a golden breakfast and whatever. Okay, well, yeah,
And she
that's
shouldn't
great.
have a job, of course.
But I mean, I remember Paul Ryan talking about that of like the kid who, was on free lunch and or free breakfast and looked at another kid who and it's like, I wish I had a mom and it's like, yeah, I'm sure he does. And your solution is that if he's hungry, she will magically become June Cleaver and that they will magically have like it's such a weird way of conservatives looking at the world. It's like, well, yes, that would be great. That's not what's happening. Let's actually fix this. Same with homelessness. It'd be great if we
Mhm.
weren't having to literally house people and that, hey, your
If
corporate
being
cronies.
horrible to people worked, it would have worked by now. There's no like, oh, we haven't been horrible enough to people yet. Eventually they'll hit rock bottom and everything will be great. And the reason it doesn't work is because we can't function without those people doing the work that they do. Like
No, I mean, and
it's
many cops, and I look, I'm not trying to all, I'm not an all cops are bastard persons. That's my co-host,
oh, I'm
but
absolutely an all cops are bastards person.
but
Absolutely.
I
All of them.
I often if you're like, okay, well, spoken to this guy, would you support a moderate increase in taxes that would potentially reduce the number of homeless people in the streets, and these programs or whatever, or more money for you to beat up homeless people and throw them out, and throw them in jail and then do it again because they're only in jail for
Yeah.
a certain amount of time. They no, no, no. I need an increased police budget to beat up homeless people and throw them in jail temporarily so that I can keep doing it. I really like beating up homeless people. And I don't know, that is not my jam. I don't think that people should be on the street. I think it's a public health hazard and it's not great. And I don't pretend that any woman who feels unsafe, or any person, male or female, feels unsafe in that scenario is a bad person. But I don't believe that it's a great idea to literally, what used to happen was, before I got up in the morning, police came and beat up homeless people, took them off the street so I didn't have to see it. And that to me is like, I don't know. It's sort of like a Doctor Who episode where you realize the secret horror of what's
Yeah.
pertaining your civilizations, that they're actually torturing an alien space creature. And you're like, oh my God, please let me forget this.
Honestly, I feel like
I don't want to do it.
like so. I reference that episode more than I reference, like, I think any other episode,
Oh.
because it is truly like so emblematic. Like,
Oh,
the
you
Star
actually
Whale,
knew you knew what I was talking about. Oh,
like, obviously, it's like it's actually one of my favorite episodes. So for non-Whovians, the episode that we're talking about is, there's this planet with like all basically the last people on Earth. And there is a queen, and she goes around like, I'm sorry, she doesn't know that does she know that she's the queen? I forget. But anyway, they have this thing where they don't tell people what the big secret is or how they're surviving at all. And every few years, people have the opportunity to like go and check and see how it is that they've been surviving. And when they show it, it turns out they've been torturing a giant star whale to like carry them through the sky for all these years. Am I explaining this right?
Yeah.
And eventually they're like, hey, you don't actually have to torture this animal in order for the animal to carry you around forever. They're happy to do it. The star whale is very nice and kind.
Just ask.
Yeah.
Amy Pond's revelation. Why don't you just ask?
Yeah.
But it is, we just would rather not know sometimes and continue the torment.
Well, people don't want to know how the sausage is made. I literally do know how sausage is made, but
it's sort of the myth of slavery, right? I mean, I think a lot of people didn't want to know what was going on in those situations. And even now, when we're seeing, and I'm writing about some of the changes to Florida history, that they're banning Black history, certain ways of being taught, and so everything is the myth needs to be a certain way. No one wants to know the foundation of that. They shut down, literally. Talk about the redlining. So again, people would rather believe, well, why are Black people, why is there such a wealth gap between Black people and white people? And they would rather believe essentially that we suck. And it's just that white people work harder, which is essentially they would rather embrace white supremacy than to embrace the fact of like, okay, well, redlining, here's what happened. Here's why white actual enslavers got a form of reparations, but Black people never did. Here's all the stuff is compounding that the government has done that has only exacerbated, like literally building the interstate through Black communities and repeatedly. No one wants to know that. And if you teach that, it creates, sort of the woke chasm, right? Because the idea, like, if you teach the real history, people will judge America harshly. So your kid comes home saying like, oh, I'm not crazy about suburbs or the history of America. And that means that the teacher's at fault because teachers trained you to hate America. And so it's a vicious circle. I mean,
part of the reason why they used to teach history the way that they did was less to inform people and more to create, so I don't want to say harmony, but sort of that, yes, to make people like not angry. It's why, they would teach um the Civil War as the War of Northern Aggression, or they wouldn't even, I think even at one point they weren't really like covering it very seriously in the North because they didn't want to, make the South sad. And they wanted to teach history to make people be patriotic and proud of America because that would then produce people who were willing to go die for America in
Oh yeah.
wars. Um, and they don't, I mean, I hate to say it, but I think that is a certain part of it. They don't want people to be like, hey, we kind of suck sometimes. We've done some bad shit. I'm not sure that we are the greatest country in the world. And I'm not sure I want to go and kill some brown people overseas to prove that.
Well, what
Um,
was I found ironic because I read the original 1619 project and I just did a
mhm,
review, finished a review of the documentary. And what is so compelling to me, given the backlash to the 1619 project, is it's inherently patriotic. All basically, it's just that Hannah Jones is sort of saying these are the true perfecters of democracy, the heroes of democracy, and it's black people, right?
yeah,
And well, am I not too an American as Langston Hughes says? So, but we're not. So even if you, so basically by saying that, well, actually, if you look at the history of it, America is a great country because Americans have been fighting against oppression constantly and perfecting it. But it's
yeah.
black people, and unfortunately the bad guys often are, and I mean white people have assisted in this certainly, but the folks pushing it have been black, who's saying, okay, we're not going to be slaves, we're going to truly fight for freedom, we're not going to be second class citizens. And that's a great American story. But if that story makes you feel as if America is bad in a way,
That says more about you than it does about America.
no, it's like it has to
But
be this that white people had over, and then slavery and segregation becomes inconvenient
mhm.
parts of that narrative rather than victories. It becomes inconvenient. So um
I mean, if you listen to like most of their criticisms of these things, you always hear these people with this extreme, like weird desperation to be like, well, we want to talk about how black people are bad too. Why can't we do that? Why can't we do that? Like, that's our main thing. We have to talk about that. Because for some reason they think that that will then, if they say, oh, well, the black people who were, the Africans who were uh, sold into slavery in the first place were sold from their home countries by people with more money, or the people who are in power. And they're like, why can't we talk about that? Because that'll then absolve all the white people for all the things that they did somehow.
oh
Um,
yes,
like,
even though you're saying that America is unique amongst all nations in freedom, but you're then
yeah,
saying that, oh well, this unique nation is actually no better than these other nations that didn't recognize freedom. It's just a weird, it's just weird um very weird argument, but I get it. I get why they're so afraid. I mean, I sort of like, you had reparations. You talk about, in Florida had banned part of the curriculum they objected to was discussion of reparations, had no
mhm,
anti-reparations argument. It's like, well, those arguments are BS. So, I mean, I guess you could, but
yeah,
I mean, most recently, like for Mitch McConnell, the arguments against reparations that I've seen from prominent Republicans has been, we elected Barack Obama president. That was Mitch McConnell.
I
Um,
know. I know.
the Obama kids exist. That was David Frum. I mean, I've never Trumper. So there are black people who are successful now. So why would we make up for centuries of racial oppression? And the idea of like the third, which is the probably the least compelling, which is we kind of got away with it,
Yeah.
right? So we
Sorry,
obviously the
the
people,
phrasing.
so America, you know, uh, black people were freed with nothing, and those people then, died broke, or through sharecropping, and where they were exploited and treated as slaves again, and they were the actual enslaved people. So why should their descendants be entitled to anything? Because we are a nation that actually doesn't really believe in concepts such as inheritance. And we renamed the estate tax the death tax because we consider that such a horrible thing. So, you know, even though we on this side have compounded wealth over generations
Mhm.
so that basically useless people can live in a lap of luxury based on wealth that actually was
They had
found and
nothing to do
exploited
with.
and that exploited black people along the way. But God forbid that I get like a check in the mail because my descendants were enslaved and were never paid for that enslavement, or that my descendants went to segregated schools that were the government specifically shifting to make it so that they were
Mhm.
receiving uh, lesser treatment. So I I guess someone could come in and give the anti reparations argument, but
They
it's not
would look
a
like
great
an
one.
asshole. Which
Yeah, maybe
actually,
Krista Riffo could do that.
you know what? I'm actually in favor of learning, all the arguments about everything. I think that they should include it and then explain why it's bullshit.
No, I'm certainly in favor of that. I mean, just so
Absolutely.
bizarre when you're like, well, Angela Davis is a communist and Bell Hooks is a feminist queer theory and she's a Marxist and you shouldn't. That's woke propaganda to teach them. It's very bizarre because it's like, okay, well, I learned about Hitler. I
Yeah.
read my like. It doesn't mean that I should believe this, and I'm not
I
obviously
mean,
equating those women with Hitler, but I'm
yeah, I
saying
know. I just
if you believe if you believe that these people are terrible but they do exist. It is part of Black history, their thoughts and their
yeah,
perspectives. You
but
know,
they exist and are important.
I mean, yeah, even in Southern schools, you would learn about Alexander Hamilton, even though obviously in the states' rights realm, no one likes what Hamilton actually believed, even more so now that he was played prominently by a person of color. But we still need to learn about that. So you sort of need to learn, like, how do you understand the civil rights movement without Marcus Garvey or even ultimately Malcolm X and his view of the world compared to Martin Luther King. Like, how do you do that? So you have to have a balance, and they are very frustrated with that. So, um, well, I guess we're at time now. Thank you once again, Robin, for
And
despite
thank you, Stephen.
have you dried off from
Somewhat, yes.
your battle against filtered water. Uh, uh,
I'm just an extremely graceful person, is the moral of all stories.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and we will see you next time. Take care.